So do feel free to text in as we go into our subject for today. Do Africans really have a future in the UK? With much of the community still trying to get to grips with the Grenfell Tower tragedy, Forest Gate in East London was up in flames and up to 6 police officers were injured during a protest against the latest black death in custody. Adair Edson Frederico da Costa, who died in hospital 6 days after being arrested in Beckton. Brother Edson's family alleged that his neck was broken in 2 places. However, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, IPCC, who investigated the case, said, quote, the pathologist concluded that there were no injuries to suggest severe force was used, unquote. Although the anger is entirely understandable, the inclination towards cynicism is a pervasive impulse, given that Brother Edson is perhaps just the latest of the Africans that make up a significant proportion of the more than 500 so-called BME deaths in police custody over the last 2.5 decades, for which not one officer has been convicted. Yet it appears that even avoiding death in custody fails to bring any respite to African people. There is a litany of ailments that disproportionately affect Africans in the UK. For example, young African women are more likely than their white counterparts to develop more aggressive breast cancer, with larger tumours 2 decades earlier and with a poorer prognosis, including a higher risk of recurrence. Moreover, Africans are twice as likely to have a stroke and at a younger age, and diabetes is up to 3 times more common than in other groups. Our young people do not escape. Generations of settlement leaves children of Caribbean heritage languishing 10 points below the national average in academic attainment, while those from the motherland are just about average. UK schools continue to present a range of challenges to the value systems of many African parents. Few seem more ominous than the advance of the so-called LGBTQ ABCDFG agenda, kings and queens, being pushed through the school system, especially through, quote, sex and relationships education, unquote. Conversely, even defining community will become less definitive as time passes. According to census figures, although the quote, Black Caribbean has established 1.1%, increasing nominally by only 29,204, the black African population has doubled from 0.8% to 1.7% from 484,700. I forgot the number, anyway, to 989,628, and those who identify as black other increased from 0.2% to 0.5%, with a population of 28,437, unquote. An additional factor to take into account are the massive levels of interracial relationships, which going forward is likely to boost the black other, while having an inverse effect on the hitherto more established black categories. As a mere snapshot of the state of Africa UK, the above does not represent the most constructive prognosis. The lack of visible activity to address these issues only promises more and steeper decline. Taking the education situation as an example, one way to address decades-old legacy of underachievement, as well as the newer attacks on values, would be independent African educational institutions. But as academic and activist Dr. K. Andrews observes, the ultimate black radical goal of black independent schools is nowhere on the horizon. Renowned author and activist Brother Paul Ifayomi Grant has analyzed some of the organizing tendencies within the conscious community and the African community at large, and has identified some shortcomings In terms of the former, as in the conscious community, he notes, quote, trying to build from the top down. Don't show me the money. Small numbers, poverty mentality, preoccupied with cultural nationalism, getting old, viewed as irrelevant, Caribbean dominated. In the wider community, he also cites several tendencies which make the community development nigh impossible in the UK, which are obsession with social integration and acceptance, massive levels of interracial interracial relationships politically for young African Caribbeans, the idea that interracial sex is some sort of barometer of racism, or the absence thereof, is so widely accepted in the UK that it is hardly worth expending the energy to point out the lack of logic underpinning this notion. Despite all of this interracial coupling, the position of Africans in the UK is pretty much where it has been for the last 70 years, i.e. at the bottom of the socio-economic ladder. Moving forward, widespread disinterest in business ownership, extremely high levels of households with children headed by a single parent, particularly for African Caribbeans, amongst several negative consequences, increases economic vulnerability, extreme religiosity and a belief in supernatural causation and solutions for human-made problems, a deep-seated inferiority complex, and finally, extreme individualism. One of the slogans from the original National Black People's Day of Action was the defiant cry, "Come what may, we are here to stay." Yet, classical black nationalists from Martin Delaney to Edward Wilmot Blyden through to Marcus Mosiah Garvey and the Rastafari movement always maintained a prominent repatriation element in their program. Arguably, many of the conditions of oppression that thrust their work forward persist today. So tonight, kings and queens, we are asking the question: do Africans really have a future in the UK? Can we see any realistic respite from the ills that plague the African community in the UK? Even if the shortcomings of our organizational capacity were reversed, would our structures be viable in this environment? Is repatriation realistic in an age of globalization? Are we too comfortable to challenge the status quo? Are things really not as bad as the naysayers make out? Our guest kings and queens are, as already introduced, Brother Leader Mbandaka, and joining us probably for the first time on the Galaxy, on our show on Galaxy Kings and Queens. No, in the studio. Yes. What's it called? Is our brother Ifayomi Grant. In addition to operating his own consultancy firm, Brother Ifayomi, Paul Grant and Associates Limited, Brother Ifayomi is the author of a number of exciting and dynamic books: Niggas, Negroes, Black People and Africans, Blue Skies for Africans, Saving Our Sons, Sankofa for the Wise Man and His Amazing Friends, Why Willie Lynch Must Die, and Buy Now, Pay Later. He's an active member of the African community and is involved in a number of community groups, some of which he founded, for example, Nubian Link, nubianlink.org.uk, Kings and Queens, education group, the African Business Development Fund, which is abdf.co.uk, a community economic development company, Nottingham Black Families in Education, parent support group, and Brother to Brother and African Men's Group, Kings and Queens. Brother Ifayomi's full bio is available at Afrika Speaks of Alkebu-Lan.org. Alkebu-Lan.org/Afrika Speaks of Alkebu-Lan, and do check it out there, Kings and Queens. But for now, let us introduce and welcome our guest, Kings and Queens, Brother Ifayomi Grant. Tendai Mwari, Brother Ifayomi.
Tendai Mwari, Brother Shakara. Tendai Mwari to Brother Leader Mbandaka.
Tendai Mwari, my beloved brother.
Tendai Mwari, Sister Kai. Tendai Mwari. Long time, so good to see you.
Indeed. It's a blessing to have you in the studio, my brother.
Absolutely.
And so we hope that you are, we know, Brother Ifayomi, that you're a man of deep insight, Brother Ifayomi. So we're going to engage in some serious introspection Yeah. In terms of ourselves as a quote unquote conscious community, and if you know me, I like that because we have to improve. But also ourselves as a black community at large, brother Ifeanyi, because our work in the conscious community takes place in that context. So we have to analyze both. And yes, so a good place to start, brother Ifeanyi, maybe just to get your broad perspective on the actual main question, which is, do Africans really have a future in the UK?
Well, just to say, if if people viewing via the camera, I think, why am I sweating? It's because you're maintaining good African temperatures in this. It's not nerves, it's a proper...
Indeed. We want to make our brothers and sisters feel at home, brother Ifeanyi, So when we come in here, it's Ghana,
Sorry, just repeat the question again, please.
Just our main question, do Africans really have a future in the UK?
Well, there's... Like a lot of questions, there's more than one way to answer it. In a literal sense, yes, because there's Africans here and there will be African people here for the foreseeable future. People will continue to be born, grow, live, die. And so in the literal sense, yes. If we mean what the underlying sense I picked up from the introduction you gave, do we have a future as quote unquote a community that functions in the way, and we probably need to define what we mean by community, that has a positive sense of self, good quality of life, and where we are able to protect ourselves and we're able to flourish and we're able to connect with our wider African world, in Africa, in the Caribbean, the United States, in Brazil, and all over where African people are, to be what some people describe as a global tribe, like the Chinese and some other people are global tribes, if you want to use that term, then that's a point where we are a long way from that.
Right.
But it is a choice. We can choose to become that.
Okay.
But we need to understand what it actually takes to actually move from our current situation of lots of people who look like each other,
right,
to people who look like each other and actually understand they have something in common worth fighting for. Yes.
All right. So, I mean, what does it take, brother Ifeanyi?
Right. Well, I think in a way we should go back to basics. Santi. We should go back to basics and probably, I think there's two things we should look at. One is, what do we mean by community? And then two, what does it actually mean to have power?
Right.
So I always think it's good to define terms when we start things.
Yes,
because then it gives us a basis for understanding.
Definitely.
If you're trying to set a goal, you understand when you've achieved the goal.
Definitely.
It's like if you have an action plan, you've got no measure of success at the end of it.
Yes, yeah.
All you have is activity, but nothing to say where we're successful. So if we think of power, I think it was Professor Wade Noble said, power is the ability to define reality and have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. And other people said power is the ability to cause or prevent change.
Yes.
So I think the Professor Noble's definition is more sophisticated, and I think gives us a sense of, so we can start thinking, can we define our own reality? So that's one sense of thinking about power. Then if we think about groups of people who exercise power in the world, you have to understand, okay, well, what are the common characteristics that these groups of people have?
Yes.
So
yes.
I think as Ivan Bansertim, I know certainly I've heard Femi Biko say there's two legs of culture, which are language and spirituality or religion.
Right.
And nations or groups of people run the race of life on two legs.
Yes,
a bit like humans, bipedal.
Yes.
So, two legs of culture. How do you know countries or people who are strong and powerful? One of the things they have in common, they use an indigenous language.
Yes.
They use it often in business, in education, as well as in their social life and in their religion. And they practice an indigenous religion or spirituality. So when you look at countries that exercise power in the world, we could take the United States. They use English as their language, and they actually had a vote at one stage. They had a vote where they had it was between English, German, and Hebrew as which was going to be the language of the United States, and English just saw out German. It would have been interesting if they'd chosen German, given what happened in the 20th century, but they chose English. So that's English is a European language, and obviously the people who founded what we call the Republic of the United States were Europeans. And they obviously practice what they call their version of Christianity, which is indigenous in terms we know it to Europe. Although I know people will sort of maybe have some different views on that, but it's basically a manifestation of European culture, particularly if you read Marin Barani's book Urugu.
Yes.
So you look at China, for example, doesn't have a religion, but has a philosophy, Confucianism.
Yes.
Which is indigenous to them, and they have Mandarin, which is also indigenous. Obviously, there's other languages as well, but it's indigenous to that region. They exercise power in the world. If you look at Germany, they speak German and they practice Christianity. And so the list, we can obviously go on, and I think people can now work out the gist of it. If you look at the Japanese, perhaps not so powerful militarily now, because obviously what happened in the Second European World War, but they have Shintoism as a indigenous religious or spiritual system, and they speak Japanese. If we move to the motherland, we have the most populous African country, Nigeria, which is just about slightly more Muslims and Christians. That people argue about the numbers, but overwhelmingly split between Islam and Christianity. Neither of them are indigenous to African people. In terms of language, you'll probably say English and probably in some parts Arabic would be the dominant languages. So no cultural legs in terms of the way in which you would think about power. And again, you can go through South Africa, probably you'd say economically, perhaps the second most economically powerful African country in terms of its GDP, that kind of thing. Although not so much of it controlled by Africans actually in South Africa. And again, they have a few national languages, but English is the dominant national language. I mean, they were very, very kind. I will say that xenophilia is going to be the death of us. Even after all they went through in apartheid, they still recognise Afrikaners as one of the national languages. Sometimes you just have to despair.
Definitely.
And obviously, dominant religion is Christianity. So I think people can get the gist and go through the world, and you see that effectively African nations are running the...
Sorry to interrupt you, brother, if I may. I'm just reminded, and don't forget where you're going with it, but I was watching the Welsh Parliament the other day, and they speak Welsh, in the Welsh Parliament. Welsh is one of the official languages, and for the first 10 minutes I was watching it, I didn't understand a word that was being said. They had to have a translation, because even in Wales, they choose to speak their own language in their official institutions, kings and queens. So just wanted to point that out. Well, go ahead.
Yes, because the Welsh understand that language is an absolutely central and intimate part of your culture, because within a people's language you have concepts that cannot be expressed in other languages completely. You can try to translate them, but there's sometimes you'll hear somebody say, there's a word in my language, I can't exactly explain it in English, but it's something like this. But the something isn't an exact capture of the essence of what it means, which you have to speak that language to actually get the essence of what it is. So the Welsh have fought hard to make sure that Welsh language is taught in schools, people learn Welsh, and they're trying to... It's still a minority, but I think it's perhaps nearly a third of the Welsh population speak Welsh, and they're hanging on hard to their language because they understand that's central to being Welsh, even though they're part of the United Kingdom and Britain. So we have that idea of... So we've looked at power. We've looked at then what does that translate to in terms of groups of people, and then we think about, okay, on a sort of more micro level, community level, what does it mean to have a community? And I think Claude Anderson gave a good, simple sort of description, 4-stage description in terms of the first thing is a shared identity. He said when you have a shared identity, you can then have trust. When you have trust, you can have cooperation. When you have cooperation, you can then have accountability. So I think that gives us a kind of initial framework for actually thinking about, okay, what are the issues that face us? And I would be perfectly frank with you that we face an awesome challenge, because I think simply because of the two legs of culture bit, that in itself is a huge challenge. I mean, I just went to just come back from holiday with my wife and daughter in Morocco, and it's really interesting going there, because what you see is how much your religion, your culture defines your identity. Because for example, people would come up to my daughter and begin speaking Arabic because they thought she was a local person. They didn't denote, say, are you African? That was not their thing. It was they thought she's local, so therefore you speak Arabic and you're Muslim. And some spoke to me in Arabic sometimes, and I didn't understand. So, but you see there how completely religion is at the center of their life.
They assume you speak Arabic.
They assume you do.
Yeah.
And then from there, because they were a French protectorate, which means colony, but then we'll go to French. and then after that, and then you say parlez-vous anglais, and then they say no, or they'll speak English to you. So you and again, even there, you see that how French has now become such an important language there because the French colonized and they imposed their language, which is obviously what colonizers always do. So lots of signs you'll see in French, and but certainly all young people will speak Arabic and will speak French. Some of the older people will just speak Arabic, but nearly all of them will speak Arabic and French. So colonizers always understand that's part of their job, is to interpose their cultural identity onto the people they conquer and colonize, because what they understand is even if they physically leave, if they leave that cultural imprint, they still have psychological dominance over those people. Because if the people are speaking their language, in your brain it tells you there's something important about these people who gave you the language you actually speak. If you practice their religion, now obviously the Moroccans didn't take on Christianity, but if you take on your colonizer's religion, the religion is an expression of culture. It's, as I think Professor Joseph Ben Yochanan said, the religion is a deification of a people's culture. So, yes, we have an awesome job ahead of us now. So if we were then to sort of, and I'll stop in a minute, but if we were then to kind of boil it down as well in terms of thinking about, we thought about power. There's two other aspects in terms of thinking about what do nations need in order to be able to function autonomously, and what you might call enclaves of groups of people who may be dispersed in what you might call that nation's diaspora or that continent's diaspora need. So the two things for nations that you need are, you need an economy and you need military capability. The economy enables you to have military capability. The military capability enables you to deter attack and from people who would want to take over your territory and resources. No African country has that. No African country has a significant developed economy that's viable. That's one of the reasons, in a way, that although he's not African, one of the reasons why Colonel Gaddafi was taken out was because he wanted to use the gold-backed dinar as the currency within Africa, and particularly, and that's why Hollande supported the invasion of Libya, because France, they've got Francophone Africa completely locked down economically, and he knew that anyhow an alternative currency came in play, you'd start to see the unraveling of that, and France's economy would be significantly damaged if they lost control of what effect are still their neo-colonial possessions. So if you go then locally to what you might call, for example, Africans in the UK, military is not an option. That's not a significant issue. What we need is we need a powerful kind of protectorate nation or nations to protect us. Just like if I was a European, let's say in Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, French, European Frenchman, I know that I can just call French embassy if I get into trouble, and the power of the French nation can be imposed upon Côte d'Ivoire. So we need in terms of that military, we need the power of a protectorate nation or nations. The bit we can do is build an economy. And that's the bit we've signally failed to do, like having content. So that should be part of what we do, because maybe in discussion it comes out, economy can protect you from some of the ills that we've talked about. When you talk about education, we can talk about, simple example, if you want to homeschool your child, how are you going to pay your mortgage while you're homeschooling your child? You need an income stream to be able to do those things. So on a very practical level, a lot of the things we talk about, people who are higher up the socioeconomic ladder live longer. They have less stress, less anxiety, less mental health. So there's so many things where money, economy actually enables you to live a more fulfilling life and to actually fulfill your potential.
All right, thank you very much, Brother Ifoyomi. Kings and Queens, you're tuned to Afrika Speaks with Alkebu-Lan on Galaxy Radio. Log the all-important phone number. We're not taking any calls right now, but you can log the number 0207 193 0174, or you can text us right now, as some of you have done already, on 07 5083 23 744. We're going to get some of your texts right now, Kings and Queens. But before we do that, I want to send a shout out to our international listeners and national. We've got somebody from Lancashire locked on via the Facebook, sending greetings from Lancashire. We also have Brother Keely Obiawadu, who is sending his greetings. He sent his greetings earlier. And Brother Ankaku from the States. Ankaku says, Brother Ifayomi is pure genius, Kings and Queens. So we give thanks for that. And that's quite an endorsement coming from Brother Ankaku, who I would consider in such vein, Kings and Queens. So we do give thanks. And yes, indeed. So greetings, my brothers. Thank you for locking on. And we're going to get to your texts now, Kings and Queens.
Tendai More. This is 019 says, if you rely on the black community for donations, you dead for hungry. We just don't support each other. Maybe if you show clear transparency when people donate money, then more will be willing to donate to your organization. We need big movements, bro, and a clear plan of what you plan to do with the funds. If not, then to me it's just another big hustle thing, no different to Christian pastors and them peeps like Dr. Umar, Scam Johnson, and others in the States.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Can we just say that unless people have evidence of the scamming, that we're not going to really facilitate that over the airs. It's an opinion, you know. I'm saying feel free to express that, but unless you have evidence, then we do have to give disclaimers for these kinds of things, because nobody has really charged. And if you have questions, it's fine to ask questions, but when we make statements like that, we could put ourselves in problems, Kings and Queens. So let's Tenamwa.
Well, sorry, you go first.
Tenamwa, I just wanted to say that. I mean, I'm not member of Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, so I can speak as an external party. I mean, I've recently made a donation to the movement because to support them in terms of their building. I think, I mean, to compare Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement to some of the pastors like Eddie Long, I mean, these people have, as far as I'm aware, and you can go on the internet, look up Creflo Dollar, you know, he showed his house with his big chandeliers and his Bentleys and private jets, and he was asking his congregation, I think, for $7 million for a new private jet. As far as I'm aware, Brother Mbandaka, maybe a bicycle.
I'll show you my car when we leave here.
But it's not a Bentley, I can assure you.
Definitely isn't.
So there is, I mean, certainly I can just say that the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement is not a movement that's trying to make money for any individual. Yes, they've been committed doing the work, and it's nothing like. I mean, I know people know about these sort of hustler pastors who are multimillionaires, but it's nothing like that. I mean, I mean, I think if anybody has any knowledge of the movement, you'd say that there's. You can't do this for money. You have to do this for love and commitment.
Very real.
So,
very real.
you know, I was happy to make a contribution because I know that the group has always been supportive of me, and I believe in reciprocity. And I know that the group is committed in terms of what they do, and they put in the work for our children as well as for the adults as well. So, that's just my opinion.
Thank you very much for that, Brother Ifayomi.
I just want to say very quickly, I mean, anyone who knows anything about the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement will know that we're an open book. Everyone knows where to find us, 282 High Road, Leighton. The very building for which we make a shout out to the community for some assistance to continue to sustain that building so we can continue the work that we do for the community. That building is there. Brothers and sisters, many brothers and sisters have come and have benefited from a range of events and activities and programs that we have put on in that very same building. So it's there. You know, it's what we're putting the shout out for. It's materially evident. Our schools, our homeschool collective, we've had the parents of our homeschool collective on our show. We've had the children on our show speaking about the experience of being a part of the homeschool collective. The Alkebu-Lan Academy of Excellence is there. We've had members of that academy, children and their parents, on this very show. And we've just linked up with 2 other Saturday schools and had a Pan-African Sports Day, which we announced the outcome of in our show this evening. And I could go on and on. What we're doing this evening, brothers and sisters, is work. We're working for our people. We're presenting a program discussing issues that are vital to the upliftment and the empowerment of our people and the salvation of our people. We're going through some very difficult times, as we heard Brother Ifeanyi laid it out just on the challenges that face us internationally. Research has to be done. You heard the spec that was read, a very well-researched, very authoritative spec, brother. That's work. So I just want to just put that, add that
give
to
thanks.
what Brother Ifeanyi kindly
give thanks
shared.
for that, brother leader. And in Kings and Queens, this show is introspective. You know what I'm saying? So we do. You know, we are going to be engaging in self-critique, and we'll do that in the next line of questioning. However, we want to put that critique in context and also be appreciative of that context, even as you answer the question. So when I made my statement earlier, I was actually referring to the comment that was made about Umar Johnson. But yes.
But I just want to make it clear that we as a movement have never minded and never take exception to being called to account, to being challenged. But when all we ask for is respect, and then we ask brothers and sisters, when you pose your challenge, then just sit back and listen and make an objective observation of what our responses are.
Indeed, Kings and Queens. So yes, do stay tuned, and we Tenawar. Go ahead.
Okay. Second text says, "Hi, Brother Mbandaka. Have you heard of Peter? He used to phone you on VOAR. I found him funny and interesting." That's from 287.
Yes, I remember Peter very well, and if he's listening in, we send our love and respect. Hope he's well. I know he was going through some health challenges, so I hope our brother is well.
Love and strength, Uncle Justin, there, Brother Peter. Yesterday, Kings and Queens, as we move forward now, one of our questions, Brother Ifeanyi, this is why I say we're going to engage in some introspection, is even if, leading to what you were saying earlier, even if the shortcomings of our organizational capacity were reversed, would our structures be viable in this environment? Yeah. So before we get to that question, though, I think we need to interrogate some of the things that you've identified as the shortcomings in the conscious community, and some I know that some will ignite some debate, even in the room, which I'm sure you're welcome. And some, we just need to expand upon a little bit. Yeah. So the first one is trying to build from the top down. Explain what that means, Brother Ifeanyi.
I suppose what I mean by that is that when you're trying to, if you're trying to build something nationally, you first have to have something locally.
Right.
So what I think we've lacked is strong grassroots organizations in every sort of town and city where we have any sort of significant population that have credibility and the ability to assist people and then be able to build something from that level upwards. Right. I think because we've been weak structuring and organizationally and often quite our power kind of dissipated across many different kinds of groups. We've sometimes tried to do national, but the structure to actually do anything on the local ground just isn't there. So I've been to meetings called by certain groups, and there's been 3 of us turned up.
Yes.
So
we've all been there, bro.
Yes. So trying to and you realise then that group may be national, but there's no kind of local infrastructure apart from in maybe 1 or 2 hubs. So I think the first thing to do is to
strengthen the local.
Build something concrete that makes a difference. I mean, for example, you take a business model. Before you franchise something, what you do is person comes with the idea, normally sets up maybe 3 or 4 of the units and shows that they work.
Yes.
And then once they establish the model, then they put it out to franchise, and they say to people, you pay for the franchise. I'm not talking about the money bit, but you copy the model. This is a recipe that works. This is what you do. This is how you lay it out, and then it starts to expand. You don't have no units and say, right, we're going to just have a national when we haven't tested it, because the idea of doing the local is to see what works and what doesn't and to refine it.
All right, understood, bro. It sounds like what you're saying is basically that all the Africans in the UK need to move to London. I'm joking, that's a joke.
If you buy me a house in London, I can get in Nottingham. I'm more than happy to. All
right. So that's a mission, Kings and Queens. We're going to buy Brother Ifeanyi a house in London. An interesting one, Brother Ifeanyi. Don't show me the money. What that mean?
What that means is that economics always seems to be the last thing on the agenda.
Okay.
So we always seem to get the kind of cart before the horse. So we we work up all the bill of expenditure.
Yes.
And then we actually start thinking, oh, well, we haven't actually got any money to pay for it.
Okay.
So
we need to do it the other way around.
That's not the way. I mean, again, think how, for example, think of think tanks. And I know Brother Leader Mbandaka was talking about preparing the show. That's work. Thinking is work.
Yes.
You know, the reason why human beings are dominant on the planet is because of our brain capacity, the ability to think and solve problems. Thinking is work. You look at all these think tanks around the globe. You're thinking, for example, in the United States, how many think tanks? Heritage Foundation, American Enterprise Institute, all these. The thing that they're funded by corporations and people of what they call high net wealth. They're not funded by the man or woman in the street who's on minimum wage.
Very true.
So they're funded in order to influence public policy direction, and in order to get the best brains who can actually solve problems, and then that can be fed into the policy making process. Now, we don't have the capacity to pay anybody really to think. I say most of our thinking goes 9 to 5, and it goes for some institution that's not run by us. And then what we give to the so-called liberation movement is the evenings and weekends when we're tired and we're worn out.
We call it retired time in the movement.
And I think partly that's why people are late often for meetings. They're just tired from their work, and it's just an effort to go out and do other things. So you have to, first of all, build the economic structure. You have to understand you need to have businesses to generate surplus and wealth, to create employment for your people. When you start to build that with the surplus, as people and the organizations start to develop money, then they start to create foundations and trusts and charities, and they start to invest in things. And they create scholarships for children. They do, they start to build the infrastructure that is necessary. Whereas we often start with the laudable, altruistic, charitable aims. So we say we want to, I don't know, build this massive community centre. It costs X million pounds. But we haven't got any money. And then what you notice as well, there's a fundamental lack of financial literacy in the so-called conscious community. So, for example, when you have a large project, people don't seem to understand a basic thing like inflation. So, as a simple example, if you have a project that costs £10 million, and then sometimes it seems kind of.
Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
£10 million, 10% inflation, that's £1 million. 1% inflation, that's £100,000. What that would mean is you'd have to raise £100,000 in the first year just to stand still. You wouldn't have made any progress towards getting to because the project is actually now 10,100,000 after the first year because of inflation.
Okay, understood.
So every time inflation's running at let's say 2.5% at the moment. So for a £10 million project, that's £250,000
in the first year
straight away that you need to raise just to stand still. Because for example, material costs, wages aren't going up much at the moment, but they might do. Gas and electricity, all those kind of things. Things you kind of you have to input. If we don't understand some really basic things like that, then what we're trying to do is do things that are unrealistic. And it's much better to do something that's smaller, more feasible, and be successful with that, and then you can actually build step by step. So I just think that we have a fundamental lack of understanding of literacy, of financial literacy. If in the economy run by money, you need money, and we need to dispense some of these notions about money. Europeans didn't invent money.
No, and this is true. If anybody who's done Robin Walker's course, then you will know that. But I wanted to ask: does this relate to the poverty mentality, or is it something distinct? Because you've mentioned both, so is it relatable?
It's partly relatable, but it's also different. Part of the poverty mentality is because I think, particularly for Africans who've been heavily Christianized, is this idea of that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich man to go in the kingdom of heaven. And there's some idea there's some nobility in poverty. And there isn't any nobility in poverty. There may be poor people who are noble, but there's no nobility. There's no nobility in poverty. A child starving is not noble. And no parent, if you ask if their child was starving, will say, "Oh yeah, this is a noble condition to live in." So we've to some degree been, give unto Caesar what Caesar's due. I'm sure the enslavers said that a lot to their Africans, to tell them this is what you need to be doing. So we've been conditioned and. The de-brainwashing station. We've been brainwashed into some belief systems that are fundamentally contradictory to what we need to actually do to sort of move forward.
All right, bro. We're not going to go through all of them, but we should deal with this one. And this is a controversial one, Brother Ifayomi, on Afrika Speaks with Alkebu-Lan, and it's the preoccupation with cultural nationalism. So yeah, you need to explain that, my brother.
well, cultural nationalism is good because I think sometimes when you make a criticism, which I know people do, people think it's either or.
Yes.
So if you say that preoccupation with this, people think, oh, you're saying that's bad. No, it's not bad. It's not either or. It's both.
Right.
So it links to the bit about economic nationalism, and because if you think of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, what did he always stress? You need to have an economic base.
Yes.
Why did he have the liners? Why did he have the factories? Because he understands that the cultural nationalism doesn't work in the context without any economic possessions.
Yes.
And if you think about what do we always talk about all the while in terms of we talk about great African civilization, people always go to Kemet, don't they? But Kemet was built on wealth.
Yes, it was. Definitely.
It wasn't built on poverty. Just because they weren't passing around £5 notes or dollars, it was built on material wealth. Because the only way you can reach high civilization, the only way you can reach high mathematics and all those things, you need to have satisfied the human basic needs: food, clothing, and shelter. Then you can actually have specialization and division of labor.
But bro, define what you're calling cultural nationalism.
Well, I think what it is it's about this idea that reclaiming our African identity in terms of name, dress, language is sufficient for us to be liberated. And it's a part of the answer, a very big part of the answer. But unless you put it with you put the whole cake there, you're not going to address the economic issues. And I think, I mean, as I said, when I go to, when I've been going to lectures and speeches from back in, probably I think first ones I started to go to was in about 94, something like that. Yeah. It's always struck me that the tenor of the presentations have been generally about history, which is good. Yeah. As Brother Omar Ali said, of all subjects, history is best place to inform our endeavours. So something paraphrasing that. Yeah. History, which is good.
Qualified to reward our research.
Yes, thank you, brother. History is good. Psychology is good. Yeah. Some about education, but there's always been gaps in terms of the practicalities of nation building around, for example, economics, technology, how we need to garner technology, because now we've come to think of technology as being something European. Yes. Whereas again, Kemet had cutting edge technology for their time.
Yes, people can't understand it today. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
But we've now come to see some things where we feel kind of left behind. We think technology is only the technology that we see around us now, and we think it's only a European thing. When all of these sciences are built on the foundations, which is normally mathematics.
Definitely, bro. Now, I want to ask you a question now on this particular point. I'm going to bring Brother Leader in on this, but I put it to you, that because when I've heard the term cultural nationalism used many times, and it was popularized by the Black Panther Party. Many of us access the term through the Black Panther Party, and they use it as a derogatory term to refer to others who they call cultural nationalists. But when you actually check what those people who actually call themselves cultural nationalists were dealing with, it was different to what they were characterized as. And so I always have to clarify what people mean when they say cultural nationalists, because when people say cultural nationalism, most people are referring to people that wear African garbs, have African names, and beat drums, and have no political, economic, forget program, just inclination beyond that, if that makes sense. But it appears to me to be a disservice to those who actually refer to themselves as cultural nationalists and develop the cultural nationalist ideology. What would you say to that?
I don't see cultural nationalism as a derogatory term. Right. I would view myself as a cultural nationalist, and so I would see it as part of who I am, but not the limitation of who I am. So I don't use it as a derogatory. I suppose I do it to challenge, provoke, to get us to think. Okay,
understood.
What have we done that's good? What have we done that's insufficient? Because sometimes it's a case of, when you think about what you're doing, sometimes it's the case you're doing the right things, but not with sufficient intensity. Or sometimes there's things you're not doing that you need to start to do. And I think some of our issues are a combination of both of those things.
Point taken, my brother. Brother Leader, do you want to say something on this? You're like you're shaping to say something on this.
I would embrace in fact, I'd embrace entirely what Brother Ifayome has said. A cultural nationalist, to look at those two words, culture and nationalism, Let's start with nationalism. Nationalism is commitment to nation building. And a nation, we understand a nation to be a people organized as a sovereign entity. People organized as a sovereign entity. Culture, in our movement, we define culture as the collective personality of a people manifesting in a natural and complete way of life. So the commitment, the concept of cultural nationalism is where we use our culture as a basis, or we aim to use our culture as a basis for nation building. And I'm sure that's what Brother Ifayomi is committed to. I don't see that as being a contradiction to the commitment to African economic development, because we can't build a nation, as Brother Ifayomi has demonstrated, without a strong economic infrastructure. We can't have community without strong economic infrastructure. Indeed, even for our organizations, our small organizations, to survive, it needs within its structures an economic infrastructure. So I don't see it as being the antithesis of economic development. I don't see that cultural nationalism is a viable ideology without principles of economic development underpinning it. I think the leading examples of cultural nationalism has to be the legacy of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and the eminent prophet and king, Papa Omowale Malcolm X. And both of them were committed to sound economic development.
All right. All right. We have to move on very quickly. There's so much to go into, kings and queens. But we encourage you once again to log the all-important interactive number. We're going to open up the line soon, 0207 193 0174. Pertinent to this question, my brother, is the issue of repatriation. In fact, no, before we get to repatriation, I should ask, because we're in the midst of a high political season, my brother, and you may be aware, if you didn't hear our shows that dealt with the election and these kinds of things, and we have to deal with the fact that one of the things that you said that is a feature of our community in general is obsession with social integration and acceptance, molding ourselves in the society in which we live, culturally, politically, economically, and so on, and one of the definitive and ever-growing expressions of that is the necessity and the demand upon members of the black community that Africans take part in the political process, in the state political process, that is, via voting and these kinds of things. In terms of improving our lot as a people, where do you think taking part in the political process, voting and these kinds of things lies, especially in relation to independent organizing and self-determined nation building and these kinds of things?
Well, I think that it really depends on... my view in terms of voting is quite pragmatic, that you do so in an informed way if you think there is tangible benefits that you can get out of it. But to be honest with you, it's the precursor is almost you have to have a block. You have to have a block in order to exert influence. Right. Because, for example, if you take both the UK and the US, Africans vote Labour and Democrat. So, you virtually don't have to ask almost. And so what happens in that process on a national basis? Yes. Labour know that we're going to vote for them. The Democrats know in the US we're going to vote for them. So they don't bother to pay any attention to us because our votes in the bag. The Republicans and Conservatives know we're not going to vote for them, so they don't bother to pay any attention because why waste your effort on people who are not going to vote for you? Yes. So our vote then becomes redundant in terms of actually doing anything to address any of the specific ills. It's only when you have a block and you make demands before the election, and those demands are publicly acceded to, that then you can say your vote on a national level can be affected in effecting change. Whether it's about things like stop and search, deaths in police custody, calling for a royal commission to treatment of Africans in the criminal justice system, treatment of our children in school, whatever it is, you have to make those demands as a block, and you have to make them publicly, and you have to have those leaders publicly say they will give it, so it's on the record. So your vote must be for sale. To whoever will meet your community's needs. If you just got a whole load of random individuals, then there is no African agenda. All you vote on is I'm here for Yomi.
Yes.
What's in my best interest?
And I like Jeremy Corbyn.
Whatever my socioeconomic level is, or if there's a particular policy, I don't like the Conservatives saying they're going to cap sort of social care. You just then vote as yourself, as an individual, perhaps as a maybe within your family.
Okay.
So if you go to a more localized level, again, it depends on your population concentration. It's easier in the United States where they have, for example, majority African cities. They've got no excuse. They should control, run everything from top to bottom. I mean, you have majority African cities in the US where they have a department for sort of minority business, and that's where Africans go in a city that's 70% African. So there you have the ability, you should be able to put in power people who you want, and you have to send them there on your agenda. But again, if you go through the main political party, they're going to pick the person who looks like you, and they're still going to subvert the process. So I think it has to be almost a process of you plan 5 years in advance. So you're looking for the next election, and you're starting to build your agenda, and you're starting to canvass on the ground, and start to build up. Say, let's build up a consensus as to some of the things that are our red lines in the or mark in the sand.
Okay,
these things are non-negotiable. These things perhaps are negotiable because politics is always about horse trading to some degree. So that's my view on politics. I'm not a great fan of politicians in general.
All right. There's more to be got in on that, Kings and Queens, but we're going to be because of time.
I'm going to take this text here, and it says, black people spent 32 billion in the UK. That was in 2014. God knows how much it is now. We waste this on silly material things like cars, jewelry, and Indian hair. We need organizations that are forward-thinking and plan to help in our development. We need buildings and employment for our youths. I will donate, but I hope it will yield constructive results in the end. Good show, peace.
Tenamwara, give thanks for that. Yes, indeed, Kings and Queens.
So another text said, it would be a good idea to have a discussion on the Arab slave trade. Very little is known about it. And that's from Thomas.
Thanks, Thomas. We'll do that soon. By the way, Kings and Queens, do want to let you know that the month of Mosiah is fast approaching. And as you know, we have, our Afrika Speaks with Alkebu-Lan shows in the month of Mosiah are usually blisteringly heavyweight, Kings and Queens. So we look forward to that. And we are scheduled to be dealing with the issue of black organization and its relevance or irrelevance, Kings and Queens, in today's world during the month of Mosiah, either as a community meeting or an Afrika Speaks show, Kings and Queens. So do stay tuned for that. We'll be delving deep into the redundancy or extreme importance of black organizations, Pan-African organizations in particular, then. But for now, brothers and sisters, just before we open up the lines, I want to ask Brother Ifayomi about this issue of repatriation. Brother Ifayomi, I'm a man in my early 30s, and from my mid-20s, I can say that the prospect of living here and organizing among African people here began to make less sense to me. It just seemed to be more fruitful with all the challenges that we have in Africa and the Caribbean, that the stress might be more fruitful even in a land where we are the majority. And many people say this. There are those who say that it's impossible to maintain yourself economically and even socially as 2% of a population. Nobody's ever been able to reverse that condition in history. I've heard that before. What is your viewpoint on this? And in that context, is repatriation something that we need to put more significantly on the agenda?
Yes, it's not impossible to maintain yourself economically as 2% of the population. I mean, for example, people who classify themselves as Jews are lower population than us here, and I think they constitute perhaps maybe 3% of the population in the United States, and 20% of the millionaires and 30% of the billionaires, and they have no problems in maintaining themselves, and they have a global diaspora.
Isn't that predicated on the fact that they have Israel, though? As a power base that serves their needs wherever they are in the world.
We should have Africa, notionally, and Israel is a barren country in comparison to Africa. So I think
it's 3%. I think it's 3 million of them in America, which would be about 1% of the population. I think. I really don't think it's 3%.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue. I couldn't say I know the exact figure, but I know it's a very small population in comparison to Africans. And again, even if you look at people like the Chinese in Indonesia, they're a larger population than we are here, but it's less than Africans in the US. and they control, if you look at the largest businesses in Indonesia, they control something like 80% of all the largest businesses in Indonesia, which is a Muslim country as well.
But again, China, you know what I'm saying? So there's a pattern developing here, bro.
There's a clear pattern, and I'm hoping listeners are picking up on the pattern. So in our current state, yes, it is impossible because we're disorganized. We don't have, we don't even necessarily need the whole of Africa to be. I mean, I don't believe in the kind of Nkrumah's version of continentalist Pan-Africanism. I do not believe in that. I mean, you're compounding difficulties upon difficulties.
For the sake of the listeners, what do we mean by continental Pan-Africanism?
Okay, well, when Pan-Africanism was first kind of articulated, it was Sylvester Williams, Henry Sylvester Williams, Trinidadian lawyer, and when he organised first Pan-African Congress, which was held, I think, 1900. 1900, it was held in 1900. The notion of that was effectively organising African people as we know it. They might have said Negroes or black, whatever, but African people. Marcus Garvey talked about organising the 400 million Negroes around the world. That was the original vision of Pan-Africanism. It was about Africans at home and abroad.
That's right.
So, culturally, ethnically, racially, whatever you want to term you and use, Africans. Nkrumah changed that to mean not only African people like us abroad, but also everyone who lives on the African continent. So the Arab-dominated sort of 30 or to almost 40% of the land mass. And if you take the logic of it, all the Afrikaners who were imposing South Africa apartheid in South Africa would have been part of this idea of continentalist version of Pan-Africanism. And to me, Pan-Africanism is about the people first, not the land.
Right.
If there's no African people, what's the point of there being I mean, because feasibly you could have a future in a world where there's no Africans here and you still have a continent of Africa. Now, would that be the fulfillment of Pan-Africanism if those people who are there were united? So, as I said, I don't necessarily believe in that. All we actually need is initially one or two strong anchor nations.
Okay.
That's the challenge. It's easier said than done, but that's what we need. So that when you talk about the Chinese, then you have anchor nations who can then trade and also offer protection.
So, given that, Robert Ifayomi, where does
but surely that doesn't mean that we cannot effectively organize for power as African people wherever we are in the world. And we had an excellent example of how that can be done by Papa Garvey himself. Do you want to speak to that, Brother Ifayomi? Tendai Mwari.
Yeah, Tendai Mwari. I mean, I'll be fairly brief, but yes, we can organise absolutely on a grassroots. And as I said, we need to build grassroots first of all.
Yes.
We're not going to build the global infrastructure first. We're going to build the local groups, national groupings, and then we need to put the bits together, the tentacles together, and then that's how you start to build the wider consciousness. Because we need to remember that Pan-Africanism generally has always come from outside of the African continent. So when you talk about going back to Africa, just to get back to your point of repatriation, significant challenges there.
No, definitely. but this is the point. So we just last question before we open up the lines. But probably you actually brought in Papa Garvey and the UNIA program where these things are concerned. And whereas they gave us the black for practically everything, but in terms of local national organising where we are, but the Africa program was defined, pertinent, and inevitable in many ways. That it was on train, and so the goal for developing a power base on the continent was central, and as far as Papa Garvey articulated it, fundamental to really achieving the goal for Africans around the world. It would appear to me that the repatriation element of our movement is on the back burner at the moment. We don't seem to have many organizations that are fronting or forwarding the agenda for how we, like you said, in terms of developing one or two power bases. Is that therefore one of the things that we should be heightening the profile of? Should more of us be organizing from where we are to return and to help build what those power bases in whatever nation we see as most viable, where is most forward, maybe Zimbabwe we might say. So we be organizing to say, right, a group of us need to be really organized to go to Zimbabwe to ensure that Zimbabwe becomes that power base that we need in 5 to 10 years' time. Tendai Mwari? Anyone can go first?
Well, Tendai Mwari. Well, as a backdrop to that, Papa Garvey said, I know no national boundaries where the African is concerned. The world is my province until Africa and all Africans are free. Yeah.
Probably, he didn't send it to Australia, you know.
Sorry?
He didn't send it to Australia. He didn't even send it to anywhere else in the Caribbean. He sent it to Liberia
Yes.
on the African continent for a reason.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. But he recognized that there were Africans all around the world, and that wherever we are, that was his message to us, that wherever we are, we must organize for power. But then our focus must be emphatically on the African continent. Brother Ifeanyi talked about the first Pan-African Congress organized by Baba Henry Sylvester Williams. That conference, even though it was organized outside of the African continent, it was about how we protect Africa from the scramble of Africa. The scramble for Africa that was taking place. That was on the back of the Berlin Conference 1885. But it was about mobilizing Africans around the world to defend and protect our motherland. And to organize for power as Africans wherever we are.
As well.
So that was always the focus. The focus was always our motherland, the liberation of our motherland, the protection of our motherland.
Just to compliment what you're saying, the International Convention...
Coupled with the... Sorry, Brother Shakara. Coupled with the mobilization of Africans wherever we are. Both are simultaneously... important.
But sorry, just to clarify what you're saying, the International Convention of the Negro people of the world in 1920, the UNIA, had a heavy focus on the decolonization. By that point, the scramble had already taken place. It was deep set on the continent, and so the agenda has always been there. But we're talking about our prospects today in the UK, and I'm asking the question: does it appear that element is very very much diminished in terms of its prominence as it was for Henry Sylvester Williams, for Marcus Garvey, and the organizations that they were both representing and developing at that time?
I think both elements. I don't think, Africans worldwide, we're nowhere near as organized. Look at Africans in the UK. Are we anywhere near as organized as Africans in domiciled in this place, in this oppressive place? Are we anywhere near as organized as we ought to be? Are we anywhere near even as mobilized as we ought to be? No, we're not. You know, and the same applies to our focus on the African continent, organizing for repatriation, sending out the message of repatriation. On both sides, we're nowhere near where we ought to be. And
I think we also need to recognize the changing face which some of your statistics laid out in terms of the composition of the African community in the UK now, because now the largest group and majority are either born in Africa or parents born in Africa, so very direct link. Probably in terms of people's the idea of repatriation doesn't kind of, because they can go back to their
having said that,
family easily, and also let's be frank, lots of people are trying to scramble to get into the so-called West and get into Britain, so people think this is where the going is good. So I think when you think, and then if you think of the Caribbean, maybe like my children's generation, I was born here, parents from Jamaica, my children born here. For a lot of that kind of generation, unfortunately, it's all this I'm Black British is my kind of identity, and it starts to go further and further away in terms of the consciousness, unless you put in place. So, for example, we talk about Jews in the kibbutz. Unless you put in place Camp Africa, programs which actually systematically give people. And I'm not just talking about having holidays, but I mean programs which bring people into an environment in Africa which helps to reinforce their identity, which we haven't done on a wide scale level. I don't
know of any Pan-African organization that's doing that. Well, we're talking about the UK. I know of groups or individuals who have companies that do tours in like Ghana or them kind of things there, and some of those might have Pan-Africanist inclinations. But when I'm talking about organizations or groups, if that makes sense, because we're using Sylvester Williams and then Papa Garvey that are doing that work. There was a meeting the other day in Croydon to do with setting up a business and settling down in Gambia. You know what I'm saying? So people are starting to do these things. They're not necessarily coming from organizations or Pan-African groups.
I think the essence and the crux of the message here is that we must not underestimate the potency or the potential of the work that we as Africans can do outside of the African continent that can impact on the African continent. And history demonstrates that to us. The first Pan-African Congress in 1900 Then there was the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Communities, organized under the leadership and inspiration of Papa Garvey. Events such as the 5th Pan-African Congress, 1945, that happened here in London.
But what are we in today, leader? Where are we at today with this issue?
Sorry, you had some of the but the historical context is important.
No, I think we've substantiated the historical context. Yeah, but in terms of, do Africans have a future in the UK? And we have to look at the role of, because we say we're fighting for our motherland. Yeah. So is our focus on repatriation or Africa concretely sufficient in this day and age, commensurate with the challenges that we are facing in the UK?
No, it isn't. Yeah. Is our focus on liberation it's sufficient? No, it isn't.
Okay, so then those who are focused on liberation, are we, the conscious community, sufficiently focused on...
I think that can be, but I think that can be answered in two ways. I think, as been said earlier, the dynamics change over decade, generations, as you're organizing, you see things change.
Yes.
And so, first I was going to say, the Rastafari movement has always and continues to have programs in Mum Africa.
Yes.
Always and continues. Let the sick be nourished. Ethiopian World Federation. They continue to have programs, repatriation programs to go home, go to Shashamani, do work, come back.
In Ghana as well.
So that has been consistent. Other organizations may have been more focused on the political work of dealing with the challenges here that are faced. Other organizations that focus more on the returning home, and that will happen, I think, in any context. The issue regarding, and it slipped my mind now. Which originally I wanted to address, but it's kind of slipped my mind. But go ahead.
To the repatriation?
No, it was just I just kind of interjected when Brother Leader was saying something, and it's
all right. Kings and Queens, the lines are open. 0207 193 0174. Once again, 0207 193 0174. Do Africans really have a future in the UK? We are joined by our illustrious guest, Brother Ifayomi, and our resident guest, Brother Leader Mbandaka, who are answering this question most eruditely for us, Kings and Queens. Mama Kai?
I was also thinking, Shakara, that maybe our guest can elaborate a little bit more, that I think Brother Leader touched on it as well. There are less, people focus on organizers and what they're doing or not doing. But over the years, you see there's less people joining organizations to do any work.
That was one of the issues.
And so we expect the organization to
grow.
Yeah, and do all these magnificent things. Why you not do this yet? Why you not do that? So, well, first and foremost, you need people. You need people in the organization to do this, to its capacity to grow and have impact needs people. So when you don't have that, anybody can sit on the outside and say, what organization, you've been here for 30 years, why you haven't done this or why you haven't done that. Don't assume that these organizations have not tried. But when people join, you start up new programs, and then in that same process, people leave. And so, we can look at why people leave. But, whatever challenges they were faced, why they left, probably with the same challenges that the ones that stayed, but they stayed. We have a caller.
Brother Bob. The legendary Brother Bob.
Good evening, Afrika Speaks, Alkebu-Lan.
Good evening.
I wrote his name down, in my own kind of way. Yomi, Brother Yomi. And I agree with Brother Aku, who said that he got genius mind and brain. Yeah. So anyway, brilliant. I just want to make some comments, right? The fact that we do have a future in this country, is it a bright future, or is it just a relative future, or is it just a future? You know what I mean? Which one do you want? Anyway, the thing is, right, power is the ability. I reckon it should be the other way around. Ability is the power. That's my little thing about that anyway. The next one is about Brother Mbandaka. I think Brother Mbandaka should be bold as brass and drive a big car. The biggest car I can find. Yeah. So, because what that would do is give them some recognition, and it's kind of a reverse psychology. Yeah, donation can be demanded, because this thing in what you call it, the fire in Grenfell. That was a demand for donation, a demand by disaster. So you can see that the donation can be demanded in a kind of diplomatic way as well, because I know people who do that, right? So anyway, I wrote down some of the things, but you know what I mean. I believe I might leave it at that because yeah, that's right. One more. You can pretend, Yeah, like by driving a big car, because the song "The Great Pretender." The Great Pretender. That's a great song, isn't it? So you can follow that song and be a great pretender, and probably you might attract the law of attraction, or bringing the law of attraction to into play. You see, so we don't have to be kind of downhearted all the time. Yeah, let's try something different. You know what I mean? We have a big car. Let's pretend that we have worth of money. You know what I mean? And build up the ability to organize a great organization. Anyway, Tendai Mwari.
I have anything against a big car. I have nothing against wealth. Let me just make that very clear. Yeah. But not for the purpose of ornamentation and ostentation.
Indeed.
But for the purpose of practicality. A bigger car has a bigger capacity to carry more people and more things. Indeed. And when you're in organizational work, you tend to need
big car
yes, to carry more things and more people. Yes, So Brother Bob or anybody else want to buy me a big car?
It can't think of prestige,
Sorry?
It can't think of prestige.
Okay, my brother.
All right, Brother Bob.
I mean, you refer to the Americans, ministers, them. It's quite possible the first car they never buy it or own it.
All right.
Anyway,
Brother Bob,
you're bringing some good subjects.
But Brother Bob, you haven't answered.
Analyzer.
Brother Bob, feel no way. If you want to buy me a big car, I will accept it, my brother. Don't worry. All right.
Yes. Brother Bob speaking to the relevance and importance of positive visualization there, kings and queens.
Can our next caller take their mic?
Burning all illusions. Please take your radio down. Turn your radio down, please. And once you've done so, please welcome yourself and speak your mind on Afrika Speaks of Alkebu-Lan. Tendai Mwari.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Tendai Mwari.
Yes, good evening. Yeah, I like what your guest was saying about going back to basics. I think that's important. This week it's been very strange. I listened to two radio stations, one based in Washington, D.C., WOL. I don't know if Brother Mbandaka is familiar with a brother called, oh man, his name just slipped my mind. Brother Amafika. Of a million one, an organization called the Million and One.
I know Brother Amafika.
You're familiar with him, yeah?
No. Yeah, I've known him for a number of years.
No, I'm not directly familiar with him. I've heard the name, but I'm not directly familiar with him, my brother.
Yeah, Brother Ifeyomi said he is.
Brother Ifeyomi is.
Well, it's amazing that Brother Ife says he does, because I'm listening to WOL at this present time, and he's on the radio, and he just, after you spoke about block voting, about 2 seconds later he's talked about block voting, and his organization, as you know, if you know him, he represents block voting. Now this has happened 3 times this week, and I was thinking to myself, how can it be possible that one's on the other side of the ocean and you're on this side of the ocean, and you're both talking about the same things almost within seconds? It happened earlier on this week with Brother Kwame. So I thought to myself, well, the only way that's possible, there's something else going on here, because you don't know what he just said and he don't know what you just said. So we have higher forces that which I've just experienced 3 times that happened this week. It's a message to me that there are higher forces working to promote our struggle. But the other thing what occurred to me is that the Africans we haven't got a future in Britain. We have got no future here, absolute none in the West. And the reason why, because when I look at progressive people and nations, first thing they have their own culture. And their culture is defined by their language, and it's defined by a written language as well. And I keep asking myself, what is the Afrikan's written language? Where is it? Where is it based? How can we have a future if we don't speak in our own tongue and we don't have a written language? Which I mean, if you look at the Chinese, for instance, they have their own written language. If you look at the Indians, they have their written language. Everybody has a written language. And we, as a progressive people, we haven't got a written language. So how can we have a future anywhere on this planet? And that because there's so much power in that, so much power. We send our children off to be educated in a language which is not our own. They say the language you dream in is your mother's tongue. Well, if you're dreaming in English, that means English is your mother.
All right.
So we haven't really got a future, and we have to go back, like your guest said. We have to go back to basics. We have to build that. We have to have a written language, and that's where it must start. You know what I mean? We have to go back and lay those foundations. We know it got interrupted, but we must correct it and do that. So we have to, rightfully, you have to go back to basics and build that for us to have a future anywhere.
Thank you very much, Bernard Lujans. We give thanks for that call right there. 0207 193 0174 0207 193 0174, or you can text us on 07508 323 744 07508 323 744.
I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am.
Tanamwara Kings and Queens. This is Afrika Speaks of Alkebu-Lan on Galaxy Radio, the only de-brainwashing station. Myself, Shakara, alongside Mama Kai, co-hosting. We're receiving your calls to speak to Brother Ifayomi and also Brother Leader Mbandaka. 0207 193 0174. The question that we are asking is, do Africans have a future? Really have a future in the UK? Can we see any realistic respite from the ills that plague the African community in the UK? Even if the shortcomings of our organizational capacity were reversed, would our structures be viable in this environment? Is repatriation realistic in this age of globalization? Are we too comfortable to challenge the status quo? Or are things really not as bad as the naysayers make out? Once again, Kings and Queens, do Africans really have a future in the UK? 0207 193 0174. We have Brother Nick calling in, Kings and Queens. Brother Nick is calling in, and we're going to take Brother Nick's call right about now. Tenamwari, greetings and welcome, Brother Nick. You're live on Afrika Speaks of Alkebu-Lan on Galaxy Radio. What's your contribution this evening?
Well, first of all, Tendamwari, Shakara, Mr. Kai, and Brother Leader Mbandaka.
Tendamwari.
Yes, and Umuntu, Ugomuntu, Ugobantu.
Umuntu, Ugomuntu, Gabantu.
Yeah, man. My contribution is I had an article, first of all.
Tendamwari, sorry, my brother, just hold on one moment. We have another caller. You're waiting, but please turn your set down. Go ahead, Brother Nick.
No, not you, Brother Nick. Go ahead and speak now.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yes, I had an article about the young brother Adair who was murdered in police custody in Forest Gate, and there was something you didn't mention, Mbandaka, Brother Leader Mbandaka, when you were speaking about it, that reports are coming out that he was putting packages of cocaine and heroin into his throat, or trying to put them down into his body, and this is, I don't know if you heard that one, but I want to also thank Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement, because when there's something happening to our people, Alkebu-Lan is right there, and we give thanks for that. You know what I mean? What a wonderful organization you are, and we should all get behind you or get in front of you or whatever, be with you. You know, reparations. I was going to say something about reparations. Let me forget. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Yeah, give thanks.
Thank you very much.
You give thanks for the commendation, my brother.
Before we get a response from Brother Leader.
So let me just do a quick text, and we have Brother Kwame waiting, and who else?
Unknown number.
Okay. It says Brother Mbandaka seemed to be ignoring the sovereign authority of Emperor Selassie in regards to his political works that he had done for Africa and seem to be concentrating on less significant Pan-Africanist organizations of the West, which has the least effect on the black population. Black leaders need to study the works of Imperial Majesty to be successful in goodness.
All right, I don't know why we always get them texts there. You know, that Afrika Speaks. I don't know what more one needs to do to hail off His Majesty. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know how anyone would accuse the Alkebu-Lan revivalist movement of not respecting the work and the legacy of His Imperial Majesty.
Recognizing his political works, he said.
Huh?
He said recognizing his political
We
works.
do that all the time.
The next text says, when you first come on Galaxy FE, you promised to have a program regarding the death of Malcolm X's grandson. Can I remind you of that? All right.
Have we not done? Oh, no. Okay. Give thanks for those calls.
Maybe a normal, I'm not sure. But.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that is a subject that we've dealt with many times, Kings and Queens, and even mentioned it in passing on different shows. A very, very serious issue.
All right.
We have Brother Kwame in Nottingham. Brother Kwame?
Greetings.
Brother Kwame.
Yes, greetings.
Tenai Mwari.
Go ahead, my brother.
Mary, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Yes.
Yes, you have no future. To make it plain, you've got no future here. Why would you think that you have a future here when you are not prepared to organize yourselves and when you're not prepared, more importantly, to do what you have to do to provide for your own future? You know, it is pointless looking up to Jeremy Corbyn and looking up to a white system that, at its core, has an agenda to eliminate us. Whether you believe it or not, whether you accept it or not, whether you believe it or not, that is the reality of our being. These people have an agenda to eliminate us, yeah, and it's by any means at their disposal. Whether it's through race mixing, whether it's through Grenfell, whether it's through illness like prostate cancer, type 2 diabetes, whether it's through so-called black on black violence, that is their agenda to eliminate us. So given all this, how on earth do you think that we have a future when the odds are stacked against us? And my thing is that we should never look to this country. We should look to our mother countries, because even the European is aware that Africa is the final frontier. There was a report that came out just recently by the United Nations Population Census that says that within 30 years, Africa, the continent of Africa, will have the biggest population, within China and India. Right? So why should we concentrate on this local country like UK when there's a whole continent, right, that is still growing and that is in a way underdeveloped?
Brother Kwame?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So when we introduce you as Brother Kwame from Nottingham, and I know some of our listeners are going to be thinking, with all that you're saying, why are you still in the UK?
Okay, let me tell you why I came back to the UK. I was in Ghana for 7-8 years.
Okay.
The reason why I'm back, and the chief why I'm here, is because the economy of Ghana, let's talk about our economy now. The economy of Ghana went into depression when I was in Ghana, 2013, yeah?
Uh-huh.
I had some businesses in Ghana, right? And interest rates in 2013 were about 35% in Ghana. The highest in the continent, even highest in the world. Why would I borrow money at 35%? Say, for example, borrow $100,000 at 35%. And because of the situation at the time, and it's still the situation, it's not going to, I'm not breaking even for my businesses for me to pay 35% interest. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
So my reason was to come back here, raise some capital, which I'm doing, right, and put it into my businesses, because I can get more for my pounds than borrowing in cities of dollars in Ghana at 35%.
So you have a plan, Brother Kwame?
I'm sorry?
So you have a plan?
Well, I've already executed that. I have property in Ghana.
Yes.
As I'm talking to you now, that I'm renting out in Accra.
Okay.
Well, I'm getting a 4-figure sum per month in dollars for the property that I'm renting in Accra.
Okay.
I have a farm with an African American brother, right? That we grow organic food.
All right.
Right, but a lot of it is capital intensive.
All right.
Like we need machines, yeah. I've already laid the foundation, right? For I'm here just to get a bit of capital, right? And until the situation in Ghana goes down, but because I said,
okay.
You can look at Ghana where interest rates are killing businesses in Ghana. 35%. No, apart from the Lebanese and Chinese, no one in Ghana, right, can afford 35% business loans. This is why most of our businesses are dying. or stagnating.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the harsh reality of the economy in Ghana. Until this government has now come promising to actually reduce interest rates, which they have done, but the interest rates are still high, we're in the high 20s. We need to come further down in order for business confidence to grow.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I'm here. I'm not here because I want to be here.
Understood, Brother Kwame.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Understood. And I only asked the question because it's important that our listeners have those kinds of understandings as well. I know some of our listeners will be thinking that, so it's important that they, that we put you on the spot in them way there. So I hope you don't take any offense to that.
Hence Papa Garvey's.
Not at all.
Hence Papa Garvey's utterance. I know no national boundaries as far as the African is concerned. The world is my province until Africa and all Africans are free. Now that's not to say that our primary focus must not be on the motherland. It must be, and that repatriation is not also of primary importance. It's how we organize for that.
One thing
wherever we are as African people around the world.
And that's where my question was going earlier. Okay. Go ahead.
Tendamwari, unknown number.
Yes, Tendamwari.
What name were you calling from, my brother?
From London.
Do you have a name?
Brother C.
Greetings, Brother C. How would you like to join the discussion? You have 2 minutes.
Just a quick contribution to say that, yes, we do have a future which we inevitably will take over in every way of the West and make our inheritance the whole earth regardless. So give thanks and rise up our special people.
All right. Nice and short and sweet there, Brother C. You know what I'm saying? Everything short and sweet. The name short, the contribution short. Okay, we got Brother Kilimanjaro calling in. Kilimanjaro, boy.
Tendamwari, Brother Kilimanjaro.
Brother Kilimanjaro.
You have 2 minutes. You haven't reached 1 minute wonder yet. You're on 2 minutes. Go on.
Brother Kilimanjaro.
Go ahead, my brother.
Yeah, I could hear you.
Yes, go ahead, bro. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to extend my greetings to you and also to Leader Mbandaka and Sister Kai.
Tendamwari.
Well, the reality, and also to you guys, I forgot. The reality is the question that you actually posed.
Yes.
It's one that I've asked myself before, and there is no reality to it. That I came to the conclusion that we as African people, we actually have a future in the United Kingdom. Firstly, we must recognize the fact that we are indigenous people of this planet. That our future must, by all means, be by design if we are to survive and live in this country called United Kingdom or anywhere else in the industrialized society. We must live it by design, not just live it for living's sake because we're there per se, but when we live in such societies, we have to live in it by design strategy. We have a future in the United Kingdom. If we continue to live as such as we do right now, then, we have to make sure we have to learn to expunge one thing, which is the inferiorization of being African, and then unlock the hidden value that each and every single one of us as African people have. We must and have to get beyond excuses for why it can't be done. We must also continue to learn the right lessons. In other words, we must not be afraid of making mistakes. We have to be a team based. We have to be team based. Basically, in other words, it means for me that when we become team based, then we have to have that feeling of belonging to the sameness. In other words, knowing who we are and identifying ourselves as the same person, and sameness and oneness, sharing everything, including information and technological know-how, but also African values and vibes, etc. We have to have a culture that is strong enough to be actually respected, and we must, by all means, make it a real value. In other words, make our value real, otherwise it's just mere words. And in order for us to make our value real, we must trust in them and then act consistently. Right. We can't say one thing and then do the other thing.
Indeed.
That's not right. Our value must be absolute,
And our elders must also reinforce these values at each time they are given the opportunity to do so. In other words, we must be always African-centered. We all have to make sure that when we design, we must design with plans and a goal system to all our planning, and we must also have accountability. Otherwise, we're wasting our time. We must not only just drive out fear. Sorry, we must not lie. I'm going to lie now. We must just not drive out fear, but we must expunge it totally by developing ourselves throughout and through sharing ideas without intimidation.
Thank you very much, Brother Kilimanjaro, for that contribution right there. Okay, we're in closing words time, Brother Ifayomi and Brother Leader. So I'll ask you to just give your closing. If there's anything that the caller said that you want to respond to, or anything that you've omitted to say thus far that you would like to say, please do so now.
I'd say the beautiful thing about the future is that it hasn't come to pass. So it can be written, and you wake up, let's say there's an individual, their life is in a mess, they're an alcoholic. The next day they can become dry and they can sober up and they can have a new life. So whatever we've done in the past, the mistakes we've made, we can always review and reorganize ourselves and make good on some of the things which we didn't do as well as we did in the past. So the future can be written. So there's a future for us, whichever future we choose, the path we choose to take. And I think some of the contributions we've had emphasize the thing that we need to act locally and think globally. And then once we build that local base as well, we can start to actually build a practical global African family. I mean, we need to think about it like our body. You know, the heart pumps all around the body, the fingers and things are at the periphery, but the fingers still work as long as that blood is being pumped. So if Africa is pumping through our veins, then the fingers in the periphery, like in the UK or wherever we may be in the world, can still function, and the fingers still have a job to do to make the body have integrity and to function effectively. But when you face a crisis, blood rushes away from the fingers and the periphery and goes back to the core of your body to protect the vital organs. So that's, I think, one way we can think about what we need to be doing.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. If I may, just give people your contacts as well, like your websites and them kind of things, so they know.
Yeah, they can go to houseofknowledge.org.uk. That's .org.uk, houseofknowledge.org.uk, or blackfinancialfitness.co.uk.
Thank you very much, Brother Ifayomi. Brother Leader.
Yes, Tendai Mwari. Do Africans have a future in the UK, in Britain? Very important question. The fact is that we are here. And whatever future we have or don't have in this country will depend on our willingness and readiness to take charge of our destiny, to become the masters of our own destiny. It really depends on how willing and ready we are to organize for power. Brother Ifayomi earlier on gave definitions of power within the Alkebu-Lan Revivalist movement. We define power as the capacity to effect your will. The capacity to effect your will. If we as a collective of people, if we as a body of people can pull together, pool our resources and pool our ideas in order to amass the power to effect our collective will, the power to organize in our own interest, then not only will we have a future in the UK, we will have a future on the African continent. Because when any African comes to full consciousness, we develop a connection with our motherland, a desire to touch base with our motherland. And as the more we do that, the more the desire to return home will just naturally evolve. But we have to start somewhere. And so we who are the ones that call ourselves conscious and call ourselves organizers and leaders, we have a duty to continue to bring that message of consciousness to our people. And just to close by saying that we must acknowledge all the good work that is being done to connect our people with the African continent. Sister Shanice, who is on the station on a regular basis, is planning a trip to Zimbabwe.
I was going to mention.
For example. So there's lots of activities that are happening. More and more of our people are connecting with the African continent. If it's even just going there for a couple of weeks or a month and just touching base with the motherland, it is happening. But for us to have a future anywhere on the planet, it will depend on our willingness and readiness to organize for power and to take command and control of our destiny. I close as I always do in the words of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Unite, organize now or perish. Rise, you mighty African people, for you can accomplish whatever you will.
Tenamwa, yes indeed, brother leader. I did mean to correct myself. So give thanks for the correction. Sister Shanice is doing that in conjunction with MEMAMS, Mother Earth Mineral and Mining Services. So that work is taking place. I am seeing the need, brother leader, Mama Kai, for a show to expand upon this issue of repatriations. Especially maybe the month of Mosiah is the right time to do that. Especially because there's so many different types of repatriation that we haven't even gone into today, and it's very important because many, as you said, brother Ifayomi, so much of our younger generation are losing their back home connection. And I know that every powerful community in this country has a program for taking their children back home. Yeah, that's one thing I have noticed. So look out for that, Kings. Okay, we're going to delve into that issue a little bit deeper and the ramifications therein. This has been Africa Speaks with Alkebu-Lan on Galaxy Radio. This Kulicha Gully Day, Monday, the 3rd of July, Kings and Queens, the penultimate month to the ultimate month, which is the month of Mosiah. Look out for more information regarding Mosiah in coming weeks, and tune in next week as we continue to talk it straight and make it plain. Round here we say,
Tendai Mari.